common misconception about PC gaming is it's way too expensive to get into. Although it's true PC gaming can be expensive, it doesn't have to be. I built this small form factor console crusher for just £259 or around $300, the same price as the base PS4. Yes, we had to go for used parts to fit within budget, but with so many great deals on sites such as eBay, you can get so much more for your money. Granted, consoles tend to offer better value in regards to upfront cost, but when you take into account the higher game prices and subscription services needed to play online, PC gaming becomes a much more attractive proposition. When it comes to consoles, the hardware you get inside is what you're stuck with, whereas with PCs you can upgrade at any point in time to keep up with the latest gaming technologies. Now, this is by no means the best value PC I could have built, however I wanted to build something that was as close to a console as possible in terms of form factor, price and performance. So what did we manage to get with our £250 budget? Well, I knew I wanted to get as close to a console as possible in terms of form factor, so I went for the MSI H81i Mini-ITX Socket 1150 motherboard. This cost me just £35 on eBay. This was paired with the Intel Core i5 4590 for just £30, also from eBay, and 8GB of DDR3 1600MHz that I picked up from CEX for just £12. To cool the CPU, we have the Alpenfohn Silvretta low profile CPU cooler coming in at just £18 from Overclockers UK. For the GPU, I decided to use the Gigabyte RX 570 4GB from my previous video, which I picked up on eBay for just £70. The power supply is the BeQuiet 400W SFX Power 2, costing just £50 again from eBay. For storage, I managed to pick up this 2.5-inch Western Digital Black 500GB 7200 RPM mechanical hard drive for an absolute steal of just £6 from CEX. And holding all of these components is the Fractal Design Node 202, which I managed to haggle down to £35 on eBay. The grand total of all these parts comes to just £259 or around $320, but of course prices may vary depending on where you live and when you decide to build. With all the specs out of the way, let's see how our console crusher performs compared to the competition. First up, I just had to see if this PC could handle Red Dead Redemption 2. Using the lowest in-game preset with texture set to Ultra, we achieved an average of 59 frames per second and a 1% low of 47. Gameplay felt buttery smooth with no stutters or major dips in frame rate at 1080p. In comparison, the base Xbox One renders the game at 864p and struggles to stay above 30 frames per second. The same can be said for the base PS4, but at least it manages a native 1080p. Moving on to Far Cry 5, we see similar performance to Red Dead Redemption 2, this time using the high preset. We got an average of 59 frames per second and a 1% low of 48. Gameplay was smooth for the most part, with some occasional stutters when getting into large gunfights, but this seems to be an issue on the console versions too, the difference being consoles only run the game at a max 30 FPS and regularly drop below this target. Metro Exodus up next, using the high preset with tessellation physics and hairworks disabled. The game still looks stunning at these settings and for the most part runs well too, with an average of 69 FPS and a 1% low of 50. I did notice some occasional stutters depending on the area of the game, but this was no surprise as Metro Exodus is such a demanding title. The base PS4 runs the game at 1080p with a target of 30 FPS, but often falls short, with some severe frame drops and horrible screen tearing. But surprisingly, the Xbox One seems to run at a smooth 30 FPS in this title, with even more consistent frame rates than its bigger brother, the Xbox One X. A game I've personally played on many different platforms is The Witcher 3, but by far the best way to experience this game is on PC in my opinion. Running at the high preset, we got an average of 69 FPS with a respectable 1% low of 52. Despite its age, The Witcher 3 still looks amazing at these settings. I played for a good few hours and gameplay felt smooth, with no noticeable dips in performance. The Xbox One version of the game runs at a dynamic resolution anywhere from 900p to 1080p and manages to stick to the 30 FPS cap pretty well. In contrast, the PS4 version has some pretty major dips below 30 frames per second in the more built up areas, but at least it runs at a native 1080p I guess. And finally, another one of my favourites, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider running at the high preset with tessellation disabled. On average we achieved 59 frames per second with a 1% low of 44. There were some occasional dips into the 40s during some of the more intensive action scenes, but for the most part Shadow of the Tomb Raider runs very well and looks great too. The consoles perform pretty well too, with the Xbox One running at 900p with some occasional dips below 30 FPS. The PS4 fares a little better with a native resolution of 1080p and a more consistent 30 frames, making the PS4 the better choice of the two consoles. So hopefully this video gave you a good idea of what sort of gaming system you can build for around the same price as a console. If you don't mind doing a bit of bargain hunting on the used market, the kind of system you can build for £250 is really impressive. Now some of you may be asking, what about the PS4 Pro and Xbox One X? They can run games at 4K, right? And only cost around £100 more. This is true, however the PS4 Pro rarely supports games at a native 4K resolution, opting instead for a checkerboarding technique to achieve a 4K output. The Xbox One X is better, with most if not all games supporting a native 4K output, however the big kicker for me is the 30 FPS cap that is in place with many of these titles. For me, once I had experienced high refresh rate gaming, playing some games on consoles gave me severe motion sickness, and I just can't go back to 30 FPS no matter how high the resolution is. This may all change when next gen consoles release, and I'm excited to see what sort of performance they will offer. Prices will likely be closer to the £500 mark, but with rumoured 4K 60 FPS, that will make a similar priced PC a hard sell. If you find later on down the road that a system like this has become somewhat sluggish, you may want to consider a few upgrades. The first upgrade I would consider is a high capacity SSD for Windows and your frequently used programs and games. This will give you a snappier feeling experience in Windows and faster loading times when gaming. And if you find that the quad-core i5 is just not cutting it, one last notable upgrade would be any of the Haswell i7s such as the 4770 or 4790. You may also want to consider opting for 16 gigs of RAM to make the system a little more future-proof. Anyway guys, that's all for today's video. I'd love to know what you think of the build in the comments. Do you think it's worth building such a system at this point in time, or do you think it's better to wait for next gen consoles to release? Leave a like if you enjoyed, and consider subscribing and turning on notifications if you haven't done so already. Thanks for watching again, and I hope to see you all in the next video.